Imagine an intelligence agency. You know, the kind known for operating in the deepest shadows, guarding its secrets fiercely.
Right. Total secrecy.
And then suddenly, it's led by a man who seems to prefer expensive suits, apparently uses anti-wrinkle cream, and, well, kind of loves the media.
A complete contrast.
Exactly. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the really extraordinary tenure of one such figure, Yossi Cohen.
That's right. Our sources, they paint a really compelling picture of Cohen's appointment and his profound impact as the director of Israel's Mossad.
And this isn't just about a spy chief, is it?
Not at all. It's about a man whose, let's say, unique personal history, his strategic vision, and, frankly, his willingness to shatter established norms.
Yeah.
It all profoundly reshaped Israel's place in the rapidly shifting sands of the Middle East.
Okay, so our mission today is to unpack the controversies surrounding his pretty unexpected rise, understand how his truly unique background influenced his often unconventional decisions, and trace that intricate, often top-secret diplomatic path he forged.
Because that path led somewhere significant.
It absolutely did. It led to some truly seismic shifts in regional alliances, and you're going to hear some surprising facts and definitely a few aha moments along the way. So, ready to dive in?
Let's do it. So, January 2016, Yossi Cohen, who'd been Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's national security advisor for 3 years.
Right. They knew each other well.
Very well. He gets appointed Mossad director.
Yeah.
But his promotion was immediately clouded in controversy.
And you can see why. This job is, it's one of the most critical in Israel. The competition was intense.
Fierce.
We know the outgoing director, Tamir Pardo, actually favored his deputy, known only as N, right?
Yes. Pardo thought he'd secured it for him.
And Ram Ben Barak, another former deputy, he was also a very strong contender. In fact, N and Ben Barak were apparently the betting favorites.
They were. So what happened? What gave Cohen that unexpected edge?
Yeah.
Well, our sources strongly indicate that Cohen's pre-existing, very strong ties to Prime Minister Netanyahu were the decisive factor.
The relationship.
The relationship. They'd worked closely for 3 years, built up a deep rapport, and Netanyahu knew Cohen's positions on key issues like Iran, national security.
Their thinking was aligned.
More aligned, perhaps, than with previous Mossad chiefs. This made him, in Netanyahu's eyes anyway, a kind of natural choice.
But that very closeness, that relationship, it also led to some pretty serious ethical questions, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
While Netanyahu was still, deliberating on the appointment,
yeah,
Cohen was reportedly exploring a private sector offer, a $10 million offer.
From two individuals, Australian casino billionaire James Packer and the Israeli-born Hollywood producer Arna Milchan,
to head a cybersecurity firm. And both these men, Packer and Milchan, were expected to testify in corruption cases against Netanyahu.
Which, immediately raised red flags. Cohen later stated he met Milchan independently through an earlier Mossad operation, but the optics
were terrible.
Definitely problematic. And the ethical questions didn't stop there. Packer, for instance, gave Cohen's daughter a $20,000 wedding gift.
$20,000?
Yes. And Cohen accepted tickets to a Mariah Carey concert from him.
Wow. Okay, so how did he respond to that?
Well, he later returned the $20,000 gift and admitted it was a mistake in judgment to associate so closely with these deep-pocketed individuals, as he put it.
A mistake in judgment seems mild.
A preliminary probe found no basis to question him as a suspect, but the allegations, they certainly lingered.
They did. Reports even surfaced that Cohen won the job by pledging personal loyalty to Netanyahu.
Which is a huge deal in that world.
A stark contrast to N and Ben Barak, who supposedly pledged loyalty only to the country, to the state.
Right. Cohen strongly denies these claims, and it's true, neither N nor Ben Barak have publicly backed them up.
But the fact that these allegations even existed, plus his comfort in the media spotlight, it really suggests he was a genuinely new breed of Mossad chief.
Absolutely. The contrast is striking. Previous directors, strict anonymity, what one source called drab attire, they stayed in the shadows.
And Cohen.
Meticulously groomed, favored expensive suits, apparently kept anti-wrinkle cream on his desk.
You're kidding.
No. And as you said, he loved the media. He even chose Callan as his codename.
After the TV show character, the Assassin.
That's the one. A 1960s British TV drama. It made him a complete anomaly within the traditionally secretive agency.
And yet, despite all the controversies, the unconventional image, professionally, he was considered, exceptional.
Truly exceptional. Our sources describe him as a brilliant, even legendary case officer. He actually won the Israel Security Prize with his successor, David Barnea, for a classified operation.
So proven results.
Proven results. One source even called him one of the greatest case officers Mossad has ever known, capable of getting anywhere no matter how hostile the environment.
That's high praise.
Very high. They also noted his phenomenal memory, an obsession with perfection, and 360-degree planning.
So, okay, a controversial appointment, a unique public persona, but undeniable professional skill. Let's try and unpack the background that shaped this really complex figure.
Right, and a critical piece of understanding Cohen is his religious background. He was the first Mossad director from a religious background in an agency mostly made up of secular Jews.
That's fascinating. Born in Jerusalem, 1961, into a deeply religious family, observed the Sabbath, kept strictly kosher.
And it wasn't just his family life. As a youth, he belonged to B'nai Akiva, a religious Zionist youth movement, and attended a religious school, yeshiva, in the disputed West Bank.
So you can imagine the culture shock when he was recruited while at university in England. He was apparently the only one in his Mossad intelligence course who wore a yarmulke, a kippah.
Right, which actually earned him the nickname Yossi Dossi.
Which means?
Sort of an old-fashioned, pious religious person. A bit of a dig, perhaps.
So how did he reconcile that deep faith with the life of a Mossad agent that often required him to shed those religious markers, break Sabbath, eat non-kosher?
It was clearly a constant negotiation. Being an agent, almost by definition, meant situations where he'd have to remove his yarmulke, break Sabbath rules, eat forbidden food.
Tough calls.
Very. While he remained religiously traditional in his core beliefs, our sources note he became less punctilious about ritual details over time.
Less strict.
Less strict in practice. It was famously said, perhaps apocryphally, that he left Israel for his first assignment abroad wearing a yarmulke and returned without one.
That says a lot.
He remained apparently uncomfortable discussing his religious beliefs directly, views it as a private matter.
But it's clear those formative years left a deep imprint. His childhood in Ketamon Rehavia, Jerusalem, those were areas that saw fierce fighting in the 47-49 War of Independence.
A very charged environment.
The population there was mostly Holocaust survivors or Jews expelled from Arab countries, and the former Palestinian Christian majority wasn't allowed to resettle. What did that instill in him?
Well, his family, his youth associates, they were described as traditional right-wingers, deeply imbued with a powerful sense of the historical precariousness of Jewish life.
The historical vulnerability.
Exactly. And this background helps explain his significant strategic differences from predecessors like Tamir Pardo. It went beyond just analytical disagreements.
How so?
Cohen had a deeply visceral feeling, the sources say, about Israel controlling its fate. It wasn't just politics. It felt more existential for him.
That's a really critical distinction. Pardo, for example, he was definitely a hawk, ordered assassinations, committed to Israel's survival.
He dove, for sure.
But he seemed to compartmentalize the dread experiences of the Holocaust and expulsion. He had, sources say, deep humility regarding enemies like Iran and friends like the U.S.
Whereas Cohen, by
contrast, had fervor that echoed his upbringing. It made him naturally more aggressive toward Iran and more defiant when necessary of the U.S. That intensity sounds quite different.
It was. His political home was Likud, generally uncompromising on the whole land for peace idea favored by Washington.
Right.
His yeshiva high school was explicitly committed to settling the West Bank. He even cited Rabbi Haim Druckmann as an influence.
Who is Druckmann?
A pivotal figure who moved many religious Zionists in a more radically right-wing direction. Cohen recalled Druckmann speaking of three values: the Torah of Israel, the people of Israel, and the land of Israel. And sometimes the order gets flipped.
Sometimes the order gets flipped. What does that mean?
It means, according to the source's interpretation of Cohen, a willingness to flip the order so as to put commitment to the land of Israel, even ahead of Torah.
Wow. Prioritizing land security over religious law or traditional diplomacy if needed.
That's the implication. And it's seen as crucial to understanding his approach. It suggests a willingness to prioritize concrete security and, yes, land acquisition over maybe traditional interpretations or diplomatic norms.
That's a profound insight into his worldview. And it wasn't just philosophical, was it? Cohen actually put this into practice.
In very tangible ways. In a truly unusual initiative for the Mossad, he actively pushed to recruit ultra-Orthodox Israelis, the Haredim.
Really? into the Mossad.
Particularly men aged 24-34 into analyst and cyber units. Not just Mossad, but also Shin Bet, the domestic agency, and the police. These are agencies that previously adamantly avoided such recruits.
That's a major shift in recruitment. Shows he wasn't afraid to challenge norms internally either.
Exactly. Okay, so with this controversial appointment and this unique worldview as our foundation, let's turn to how Cohen then began to fundamentally redefine the Mossad's core operational priorities.
Right, because every director sets their own course.
And like previous directors, Iran was Cohen's absolute top priority. That position was perfectly in sync with Netanyahu's. No surprise there.
But he didn't just prioritize it verbally. He secured a massive increase in funding for the Mossad.
Huge, specifically for what they called the project, the fight against Iran's nuclear program.
And this happened even while funds were being cut for the IDF, the Army, and other security services.
Yes. Our sources even point to a government report, apparently missed by almost all media outlets, that contained these little pearls about how Cohen pulled it off.
How he won the budget battles.
Exactly, including exchanges with the Mossad High Command on strategy, how to get the funding when the IDF was, struggling with the finance ministry. That shows some serious clout.
It really does. So the focus was laser sharp on Iran.
The report apparently detailed internal Mossad discussions, including debates on how the budget should advance its two main objectives, fighting the Iran war and normalizing relations with the Sunni Arab countries.
So those two goals were explicitly linked from early on under Cohen.
Very much intertwined in this strategy.
Okay, so beyond the direct confrontation with Iran, Cohen's Mossad also relentlessly searched for technologies, right, to gain an edge.
Yes, against Iran and other threats. And to do this, he set up Libertad.
Libertad? What's that?
A venture capital fund. Basically tapping into Israel's amazing tech ecosystem, the startup nation.
Using VC methods for intelligence gathering, that's genuinely innovative for a spy agency.
It was revolutionary. A Mossad agent, identified only as Aleph, explained their investment philosophy. He said, "We are looking for companies, dealing in areas we are interested in, that are at the beginning stages with a good idea and a good staff."
So early stage investment.
We want a relationship with them and invest in their idea so that they can fulfill their dreams and we can get the technology that we can use.
A win-win from their perspective.
And this initiative rapidly brought cutting-edge tech, robotics, nanotechnologies, voice analysis, personality profiling, data mining, high-speed encryption, drones straight into the Mossad's toolkit.
Okay, so Iran, technology. What was the third pillar? You mentioned the Sunni Arab states.
Yes. Cohen saw building common ground with Saudi Arabia as a crucial high priority. Our sources call it an essential ingredient for the long-range plan that eventually led to the Abraham Accords in 2020.
And this wasn't just talk, was it? There was a tangible agreement quite early on.
There was. An undisclosed high-level Israeli delegation made a secret visit to Saudi Arabia back in 2016.
2016?
That early, yes. And it resulted in a concrete agreement. Specifically, Israel consented to the transfer of two strategic islands in the Gulf of Aqaba, Tehran, and Sanafir from Egypt to Saudi Arabia.
Those islands, they have history, don't they? Weren't they involved in the lead-up to the Six-Day War?
They were. Egypt blockading the Straits of Tehran was a major trigger. So Israel agreeing to this transfer was a very significant concession.
Why did Saudi Arabia want them?
Saudi Arabia wanted the islands for a planned $4 billion bridge project, linking its coast with the Sinai Peninsula. It was part of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's MBS's big Vision 2030 plan to modernize the Saudi economy.
Okay.
And significantly around this time, a Saudi pundit praised MBS as a pragmatic and progressive personality, specifically indicating a readiness for ties with Israel. This was a real signal of a fundamental shift happening.
Okay, so the pieces are starting to move, and then, bang. A pivotal moment that really begins to reshape the region, the election of Donald Trump in late 2016.
A major, unexpected event for Israel and, frankly, for the world. Trump had a very different way of looking at the world, as the source puts it, and certainly a different way of doing diplomacy.
Understatement of the year.
Right. And Prime Minister Netanyahu and his close circle, crucially, including Cohen and Ambassador Ron Dermer in Washington, they immediately saw this as an unprecedented opportunity.
An opportunity for what?
To fundamentally change U.S. policy, both on the Palestinian issue and on the broader approach to Middle East peace.
Because the old approach wasn't working, in their view.
Exactly. Under the Obama administration and pretty much every president before him, the prevailing mantra, the belief was, solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict first, and then you can solve the rest of the Middle East's problems.
The Palestine First doctrine?
Yes. Retired Marine General Jim Jones, Obama's first national security advisor, strongly articulated this view.
So that was the U.S. line for decades. But what were Israeli officials hearing directly from the Gulf Arabs themselves around this time? Did they still agree with that premise?
Not at all. Israeli officials were hearing something completely different, according to our sources.
What were they saying?
The Gulf Arabs were explaining that the strategic environment had just drastically changed. Israel was emerging as a real security and tech power, while the U.S. seemed to be, withdrawing, pulling back from the region.
Less engaged.
Less engaged. And crucially, they said they no longer wanted the question of Palestinian statehood to block their wider strategic and commercial interests.
They wanted to move past it.
They wanted to end their, quote, non-productive and failed attempt to isolate Israel. An Israeli diplomat even quoted MBS Mohammed bin Salman, pondering aloud why the mayor of Ramallah should dictate his country's future.
Wow. That's a blunt assessment. A clear signal the old paradigm was dead, at least for them.
It really was.
So what specifically drove this major shift in perspective from the Gulf states? It wasn't just Israel's rise, was it?
No, it stemmed from growing regional chaos and that perceived U.S. withdrawal. You had the Arab Spring leading to the rise of Sunni Islamist movements like the Muslim Brotherhood and, of course, ISIS.
A huge threat to the monarchies.
Absolutely. And simultaneously, Iran, the Shiite power, was gaining significant ground in Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Yemen, mainly through its proxies, including the very formidable Qasem Soleimani, head of Iran's Quds force.
So threats from both Sunni extremists and Shiite Iran.
Exactly. And with both the Obama and then the Trump administrations signaling a reduced American presence, Israel's standing became more important as a potential counterbalance.
Right. Ambassador Dermer had that very colorful quote about it.
Ah, yes, the gorilla analogy.
The Arab states see Iran as the tiger and ISIS as the leopard. They see the 800-pound U.S. gorilla walking out, and then they see the gorilla with the kippah on and say, maybe we should deal with them.
It's stark, maybe provocative, but it vividly captures that shift in perception. Gulf Arabs genuinely started seeing Israel as a potential protector, particularly from Iran.
And there was another factor, too, right? Netanyahu's big speech to the U.S. Congress against the Iran nuclear deal.
Yes, that was interesting. While it was heavily criticized at the time for, offending President Obama,
it caused a huge political row.
It did. But it apparently won over many moderate Sunni Arab states. They admired his assertiveness, his willingness to act independently of the U.S. on security issues, especially regarding Iran.
Okay, so this new dynamic is emerging. Israel wastes no time. There was an exchange at a New York event. Trump asks a senior Israeli official, can you make peace?
And the official's reply was swift and very revealing. With the Palestinians, no. But we can make peace with several Arab states.
Setting the new agenda right there.
Absolutely. And in December 2016, just after the election, Netanyahu immediately dispatched Cohen on a secret visit to meet Trump's transition team. That included Michael Flynn, who would briefly be NSA.
What was Cohen's mission?
To brief them on the Iranian threat, of course, but also crucially on these new opportunities for Israeli ties with their Gulf neighbors, laying the groundwork.
So Cohen steps into this high-stakes diplomacy role. It was kind of new for a Mossad chief, wasn't it? Usually they stay behind the scenes.
It was unusual, but Cohen had that experience as Netanyahu's national security advisor. He was fluent in English, French, and Arabic. He quickly became known as Israel's sort of de facto foreign minister.
Pickling around secretly.
Exactly. Flying between Gulf capitals on the Mossad's private, unmarked plane. And to formalize this, while the Mossad's traditional Tevel division, the one for covert ties with foreign intel agencies, continued its work.
Yeah.
Cohen actually formed a new directorate within Mossad, a strategic diplomatic directorate, specifically tasked with identifying and pursuing these peacemaking opportunities with Gulf states and other Muslim countries.
That's a significant internal restructuring, focusing the agency on diplomacy as much as intelligence.
A major shift.
But as we know, this kind of secret diplomacy is incredibly delicate. And there was past baggage, incidents that had profoundly damaged trust, the biggest one being the Mahmoud al-Mabhouh assassination in Dubai.
Yes, that cast a long shadow.
Can you just remind us briefly about that incident and how it impacted Israel's ability to forge these new ties, especially with the UAE?
Absolutely. January 2010, Mahmoud al-Mapou, he was a senior Hamas operative involved in kidnapping and murdering 2 Israeli soldiers back in '89, and also Hamas's key liaison for smuggling weapons from Iran.
Working with Soleimani, reported.
Working with Soleimani.
Mm-hmm.
He's found dead in a Dubai hotel room. Now, Dubai's chief of police, LT-Gen Dahi Khalfan Tamim, he didn't just accept the initial findings, he reopened the investigation.
And he used Dubai's own surveillance systems, right?
Meticulously.
Yeah.
Using CCTV, hotel records, airport data, his team pieced together the entire operation. Tamim then announced Mahmoud was murdered by a hit squad, smothered, then given a heart attack-inducing toxin, and he pointed the finger directly at the Mossad.
And revealed the passport details.
Yes, initially at least 11 European passport holders, British, Irish, German, French. Later it expanded to 26 European passport holders whose identities, it turned out, were stolen from dual-national Israeli citizens.
And the pictures, the video footage, it went global.
All over the world. The ultimate irony, of course, was that the very security systems that exposed the operation had been sold to the UAE in a deal brokered by Israel itself.
Ouch. Massive embarrassment for Israel. A huge blow for Mayor Dagan, the Mossad head at the time.
Considered a major failure. Dagan never confirmed Mossad involvement, obviously, but the fallout was undeniable.
And the strain on Israel-UAE relations specifically must have been severe.
Extremely severe. Haim Tomer, who headed Mossad's Tevel unit back then, reported very harsh words from the Emiratis. They felt completely blindsided, aggrieved that Israel acted unilaterally on their soil. We would have taken him out of the game one way or the other if asked.
So a breakdown in trust, how long did that last?
Former U.S. Ambassador Dan Shapiro revealed it led to about a year-and-a-half break in the covert ties. Complete freeze.
So what did it take to rebuild that shattered trust? How did they get back from that low point?
It was a long, painstaking, gradual process, really starting around 2011, maybe 2012. Trust was slowly rebuilt, mainly because common interests began to outweigh the UAE's sense of insult.
What common interests?
The shared fear of Iran, definitely. The chaos of the Syrian civil war and the involvement of Iranian militias there. And also, the Arab monarchies were genuinely trembling after the Arab Spring uprisings. They needed allies.
So necessity brought them back together.
Slowly. There were countless Mossad Emirati meetings, but full, high-level contacts weren't really restored until around 2015. And even then, the key figure, Mohammed bin Zayed MBZ, the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, he remained pointedly unavailable for meetings with Israelis.
Still holding back.
Still holding back. As Haim Tomer put it, nothing takes longer than gaining the trust of Bedouins, and nothing is more sensitive than the honor of the Bedouins.
So after years of careful work, Israel still couldn't get through to the absolute top decision-maker in the UAE. What finally broke that barrier? Did Israel have to offer something significant?
Yes. To truly regain that trust, Israel apparently had to make what the sources call payment. 2 key concessions, brokered with American help.
Oh, sure.
First, a commitment to never again conduct similar assassination operations on UAE soil.
A major promise.
And second, an offer of strategic remuneration. Basically, access to new Israeli technologies and security systems that had previously been withheld.
Okay, so a promise and a payoff, essentially. Did that work immediately?
Not quite. Even with these concessions, MBZ initially refused meetings when Yossi Cohen took over as Mossad chief in 2016. The highest level contact was still with MBZ's brother, Foreign Minister Abdullah bin Zayed.
So it really fell to Cohen then, despite all that groundwork by others, to finally build those strong personal relations with MBZ himself. How did he manage it?
Well, he clearly leveraged his own skills as a legendary case officer. He also had crucial support from MBS in Saudi Arabia, who was rising fast. And he cultivated new, important allies in Washington, particularly CIO Director Mike Pompeo and White House advisor Jared Kushner.
A confluence of factors.
Exactly. And apparently, former British PM Tony Blair also played a role, helping arrange talks between Netanyahu's lawyer, Yitzhak Molcho, and an Emirati minister, which eventually led to direct phone contact between Netanyahu and MBZ. Cohen's personal diplomacy, backed by these strategic shifts, finally opened that crucial door to MBZ.
Okay, so Cohen's building ties with MBZ in the UAE. Meanwhile, next door in Saudi Arabia, MBS's power is just growing dramatically, isn't it?
Absolutely. June 2017, he's elevated to Crown Prince, cementing his status as the undisputed strongman of Saudi Arabia. This is a huge factor in the whole normalization push.
What was he like, according to those who dealt with him?
Officials described him as highly approachable, having this contagious youthful energy and a clear desire to shake up his country. Jason Greenblatt, Trump's envoy, noted his willingness to mobilize everybody and anybody for his vision.
And what was that vision?
Modernizing Saudi Arabia, adopting a more moderate form of Islam, preparing for a post-oil future. And crucially for Israel, MBS showed a far greater readiness to engage with the Jewish state than his father, King Salman.
Less bound by the past.
Far less tied down by those historic commitments to the Palestinian cause. On Iran, he was extremely hawkish. He denounced Ayatollah Khamenei as the new Hitler, called the 2015 Iran nuclear deal lousy, accused Obama of getting cold feet in Yemen.
Music to Israeli ears.
Absolutely. And most importantly for Israel, MBS was actively seeking a security alliance with Jerusalem against Iran.
But we have to acknowledge this is the same MBS who also showed a pretty brutal side.
Yes, that's crucial context. He jailed around 400 Saudi princes and elites at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, subjecting them to beatings and interrogations for alleged corruption, though he did recover about $100 billion.
And the Hariri incident?
He forced Lebanon's Prime Minister Saad Hariri to resign while visiting Riyadh. And then, most notoriously, came the 2018 murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul.
Which shocked the world.
Deeply. It caused serious qualms in the U.S. and Europe. But our sources suggest Israel felt it couldn't afford such qualms. They'd identified the Saudis as the dominant regional power whose agreement was absolutely essential for any wider normalization.
A pragmatic, perhaps ruthless calculation.
It appears so.
So against this backdrop, secret dealings, rising power, ruthless actions in September 2017, something really fascinating and maybe deliberately confusing happened.
The alleged Tel Aviv visit.
Exactly. Multiple media outlets reported that MBS himself paid a discreet visit to Tel Aviv, arriving by private plane via a third country, meeting senior Israeli officials Cohen, Netanyahu, possibly at Mossad HQ. The hashtag Bin Salman visited Israel actually trended online.
If true, that would have been absolutely revolutionary. A stunning recognition of Israel by the future Saudi king.
A total game changer. Were the reports confirmed?
They were never officially denied, which is interesting in itself. However, some senior Mossad sources and also the expert Victoria Coates, who lived in Saudi Arabia, stated flatly the visit never happened.
So conflicting accounts. Coates wondered who gained from broadcasting such positive but fake news.
That's the key question. Because even if it didn't happen, the widespread reports strongly suggest a concerted and highly sophisticated misinformation campaign.
Aimed at what?
Likely aimed at creating buzz, momentum, and a positive atmosphere for the normalization process. It seems like a deliberate effort to shift public perception, making something previously unthinkable high-level Saudi-Israeli contact seem, logical, rational, even inevitable, preparing the ground.
Very clever, if true. And this atmosphere was definitely amplified by President Trump's regional reset, wasn't it?
Hugely. May 2021-2017, Trump makes his first foreign visit as president to Saudi Arabia. He gets a massive royal welcome, despite his previous criticisms of the kingdom.
And that trip signaled a complete policy reversal from Obama.
Total reversal. Trump was bellicose on Iran, where Obama sought conciliation. He signed a massive $110 billion weapons deal with Saudi Arabia, lifting limits Obama had imposed due to the Yemen war.
And the flight path.
Critically, he flew direct from Riyadh to Tel Aviv, the first official direct flight. He skipped Egypt, which Obama had visited first.
Sending clear signals. And his relationship with Netanyahu was famously warm.
A complete love fest, as some called it. These visits, this shift in U.S. policy, it created new dynamic and energy. MBS felt much safer and more optimistic. And Trump's team Kushner, Greenblatt, they desperately wanted Middle East peace progress.
And they saw the Saudis as key.
Key to rallying other Gulf countries. Key to pressing the Palestinians. They started pushing for more public aspects of the Saudi-Israeli relationship to emerge.
Enter Yossi Cohen again.
Right back into the fray. Between May and November 2017, Cohen makes a series of secret visits to Saudi Arabia, meeting MBS, his advisors, often in palaces, trying to persuade them to go public, at least partially, with their budding security cooperation.
That must have been delicate.
Extremely. Cohen understood that in the open meetings, MBS would just repeat the standard boilerplate statements on Palestinian rights. The real deals got done in the after meetings, in side room.
Back channels.
Cohen was a seasoned player with the Saudis by this point. He knew how to reel them in, but also how delicate the public relations were for them.
And he had allies in Washington pushing the same message, right? Kushner and Greenblatt.
Yes, they also made secret trips to Saudi Arabia in October 2017, nudging MBS towards publicizing some aspects of the relationship.
And did it work? Did MBS agree?
Eventually, yes. Yielding to this combined pressure, MBS agreed to some public steps. The culmination came in November 2017.
What happened?
The IDF Chief of Staff, Gadi Eisenkot, gave an absolutely unprecedented interview to a Saudi newspaper, Alaf. He openly revealed that the two countries were sharing intelligence on Iran, calling Iran the true and biggest threat.
That's huge, from the IDF chief himself in a Saudi paper.
Massive. And then the following month, December 2017, Israel's energy minister, Yuval Steinitz, went even further. He told Israeli army radio that covert ties exist with many Muslim and Arab countries, and he specifically named Saudi Arabia.
So the veil is starting to lift. Public acknowledgement is beginning. What was Cohen's next move? Did he jump in, make his own public statements now that the door was open?
Well, Cohen reviewed those headlines, the Eisenkot interview, the Steinitz comments. He definitely considered making his own public disclosures about the progress being made.
Seemed like the logical next step.
He knew the Saudis were the big brother in the Gulf. Their tacit approval was key for the UAE, Bahrain, others who might normalize. However, he didn't know for sure if the Saudis would be the first ones to actually establish full diplomatic relations, or if going public just on the security ties would maybe encourage others like the UAE, like Bahrain, to take that truly momentous step first.
So revealing too much too soon might make the Saudis hesitate, but it could push the smaller Gulf states forward.
That seems to have been his calculation. And of course, that's exactly how it eventually played out, with the UAE and Bahrain moving first.
So what did he decide?
Given his ultimate goal, which was this broad shift in the region, he decided strategically to keep silent, to hold back on his own public disclosures.
Let the momentum build elsewhere.
Wait for these other countries to get nearer to crossing the threshold before making any big pronouncements himself. The right moment for that would come later, in July 2019. But that, of course, is a deep dive for another time.
So we've just unpacked how Yossi Cohen, with his really unique personal history, that controversial ascent, and his, well, unflinching strategic vision, completely transformed not just the Mossad, but by extension, Israel's entire foreign policy approach. From navigating those tricky ethical questions early on to forging these incredibly sensitive secret alliances.
His tenure was really defined by this remarkable ability to push boundaries, to seize opportunities in what was a very rapidly changing Middle East.
And you've seen how the once unthinkable, things like direct flights, intelligence sharing, Saudi princes maybe visiting Tel Aviv.
Yeah, whether real or rumored.
It all started to seem logical, almost inevitable, with figures like Cohen, this diplomat spy, shuttling secretly to bridge decades of animosity, laying the groundwork for what would become those historic public agreements, the Abraham Accords.
It's really a powerful testament, isn't it, to how personal diplomacy, sometimes bold risk-taking, and definitely aligning with opportune political shifts can dramatically alter the entire geopolitical landscape.
Absolutely. So here's something to think about. In a world just awash with information, how much of what we perceive as truth in geopolitics is shaped not just by the official announcements we hear,
right,
but by carefully crafted signals, strategic leaks, maybe even deliberate misinformation campaigns, all designed to prepare the ground for future realities.
What's being hinted at now?
Exactly. What seemingly impossible alliances might be brewing behind the scenes right now, hinted at only by whispers, or maybe, like